What is up, everyone? I hope you're having a great afternoon. I am overjoyed. I am delighted to be joined today by Brett Kollmann. If you aren't already familiar with his work, he has his own channel, Brett Kollmann, that for my money is the best NFL-related content on YouTube. I consider his work the gold standard, and it's definitely something that's influenced my channel. So if you aren't already familiar with him, make sure you subscribe to him. But without further ado, I'm going to bring Brett into the stream. Brett, how the heck are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, the pleasure is definitely all mine. Really appreciate you being here. I know my channel subscribers have been very excited to hear you talking about the Cardinals, a whole 45 minutes to an hour of just Cardinals talk. So I know a lot of people are excited to have you here. For those who might not be familiar with you and your work, could you let everyone know who you are, what your background is, and why in the world would you root for the Texans?
The why would I root for the Texans question is the tough one. So when I was growing up, my dad worked in Houston and he worked in Chicago. And so other than rooting for any of the typical Southern California teams, Chargers, Raiders, Niners, there was like a little pocket of Rams fans when I was growing up. Rather than root for all them, I decided I'm going to root for the teams where my dad lived. And that was the Texans and then later the Bears. So Texans have always been my AFC team. Bears have been my NFC team. More of a Texans fan than a Bears fan because my dad was in Houston for so long. And unfortunately, he cursed me with two really hard to root for franchises by choosing where he decided to work. So that's how that happened. As for my background on YouTube, I worked in the production side in sports television for half a decade. I was at NFL Network primarily, while also on the side doing stuff for Lakers, Dodgers, like Olympic soccer, that kind of stuff. And, I was doing YouTube videos early on as like proof of concepts for my producers over at NFL Network. And, the format couldn't really work on television. So I totally understand why they said no. But eventually, like, people just started watching the videos so much to the point where my wife was like, you should just do this. And so I did. And 5 years later, here we are.
Awesome. Well, I've been a fan of your work for a while. I've been a modest supporter on Patreon since like October of 2020. So I think what you do is fantastic. And again, it's really been a big influence on what I'm trying to do with my channel. So thank you for being here. Let's jump right into the questions. There's a lot of things we'd like to talk about, but want to respect your time. So, you did a really outstanding video about the Arizona Cardinals offense when you went to Cleveland, and anyone who hasn't seen it should definitely watch it. It's a little bit of a longer video, but it's every bit of it's worth it. And I think you did a really great job kind of talking about some of how the route concepts take this offense that really is the same looks, but kind of diversifies. It's not as complex as it looks, so to speak, and how they attack, green space in the field and things like that. So kind of thinking about that, I want to ask you about Kliff's X's and O's and play calling. There's sort of this narrative about Kliff Kingsbury and the Cardinals that has been, he's an okay play caller, he's an okay, play designer, but it's really the talent of the playmakers that make this offensive work. So my question is, what can you say about Kliff as a coach? How good is he in terms of play design and in terms of calling the game compared to other coaches in the NFL?
I think in terms of design, he's top tier. And when it comes to this offense, I think it really is more about like design than sequencing. Like sequencing is always going to be important, knowing what to call and when to call it. But it's the design of things and how every little detail is accounted for. If you get this coverage, you run the route this specific way. If you see this front, you check out, like almost guaranteed. Like if you see this pre-snap, just be alert for so-and-so. Like the plays are so flexible in their post-snap design. And that's really where I appreciate what he does in the pass game. In the running game, I also think he's a great play designer in terms of, how he's able to generate angles and space for his running backs. For a long time, we've seen inside zone and outside zone be like the dominant thing in the NFL in terms of run games, because it's fairly straightforward in its approach. It's you double team this guy, you climb to the second level. If they win front side, you cut backside. Like it's very it's I don't want to say easy to execute, but it's a little bit there's less nuance to it. And with Kliff's run game, there's a lot of nuance to it because you've got all these different motions. The timing has to be like exact, and everything is all about angles. And sometimes you'll have guys where it's literally just a bluff block where you just kind of like give a little shoulder fake and then you keep on going and you're just hoping that he sells it enough to get a guy to jump inside, and that creates all the space you need anyway. Like it's a very, very precise run game that is harder to execute, in my opinion. I'm sure offensive line coaches would yell at me for saying that because they're like, look, there's nothing harder than executing like a perfect combo up to the mic on a zone. Like, yeah, I get that. It's really hard to do. But in terms of like overall design of everything having to work to get this running back one-on-one in space, I would say the Cardinals run game, their degree of difficulty is very high. But when it works, it's incredible. Mm-hmm. Like there's a big reason why, when Edmonds is sprung for a big gain, it's one of the most beautiful sights in football because a lot had to go right for that to happen with how much they pull, all the angles, all the bluffs, all the shifts, like a lot goes into every single Cardinals run. And I just think when this offense is on and everything is being executed correctly, like it's really, really hard to stop because of that.
Yeah, I think the first year of Kliff's offense, what everyone talked about with the run is, the spread offense and the 4 wide receivers, that's what's letting them run effectively. And there may have been some truth to that, but what you've seen with Kliff is he's adapted it, and it's now this hybrid offense. He uses a tight end more. So I think that kind of narrative that they just run the ball effectively because they're spreading the defense out doesn't cover it all. So I think some of the things you're talking about, those kind of moving pieces, the dance, if you would, of the motion. And you talked a lot about their screen game too. So it seems like they do that as well. That you really highlighted that one tunnel screen that they did that was really, that I know you were a real fan of, and I watched that a few times in your video. And so can you talk a little bit about what they do in the screen game and how that is part of that running game for the Cardinals?
I mean, they basically in a lot of cases, they treat screen passes just like extended handoffs, to the outside. Because the main goal of a run game is just get a guy one-on-one in space. That's like the main goal of any run is like, hey, you get your running back 3 yards past the line of scrimmage, one-on-one with a DB, and you let him do the rest, and that's a successful run. If he beats that one guy, he's going a long way. Mm-hmm. If he doesn't beat that one guy, he's still probably getting 5 or 6 yards. That's a successful run. So they treat the screen game as, hey, we're just going to get Rondale Moore matched up in space on a safety. And if he can beat that one guy, it's a big gain. And if he doesn't, Rondale will still probably get his 5 or 6. It's the same thing as if, you're calling toss with Edmonds, or, you're calling duo with James Conner, where you get the right double teams. Then you got a safety coming down to fill the alley. And it's like, hey, James, run over, like whatever you got to do. Same concept. And the poorly executed and poorly designed screen games across the NFL, where it seems like every time they call it, they get like a tackle for loss. That I think really comes down to either you have really bad blocking receivers, in which case you shouldn't be calling screens anyway, or you have a quarterback that doesn't understand like space and leverage enough to check out of a bad screen. Like that's the one thing I'll give Kyler a lot of credit for. Like they'll have screens tagged in a lot of different concepts, and he will usually avoid the ones that just don't have the space to work. He'll either check out of the play entirely, or he'll just like work to the other side of the concept. If it's like an RPO with like a bubble tag on the backside, if he feels like, hey, we have a better chance of just getting 3 yards on this run than getting 3 yards on the screen, he'll just hand it off. Even if the box count isn't favorable, it's less likely that you're going to take that tackle for loss on the run than you are on the screen. So I think he's very good at knowing when to throw it and when not to throw the screen. And that's a big reason why their screen game is so successful, is because they don't do it unless they think it's going to work.
And, I'd like to kind of build off of what you said with Kyler, in terms of his ability to check out and things like that. What do you see in Kyler's game on this year that is different and hopefully better than the previous years? But before we get to that, we've got a super chat. Someone's asking you a question. So I'll let you respond to this before we get back to Kyler. Where is my
So Justin, I'm telling you it's coming. I promised you it's coming. And I need to get your address again, because I'm not even going to make you pay for it. You've been waiting for like 2 years for this thing. So Eric Decker had a game winner back in like 2015 for the Jets, and like you've seen my play art series and everything like that. I did one for the Cardinals on the Hail Murray. That's over on my merch store, and I was struggling. This is way back when I was struggling to come up with what play could I put for the Jets? Like, it's the freaking Jets. Like, how many great plays have they had over the last 20 years? And Justin's been adamantly begging for that Decker game winner for literally years now. And I promise you it's coming, Justin.
Well, Justin says he loves you and he'll DM you. So awesome. So back to Kyler. What are you seeing different from Kyler this year in terms of what he's doing now that he wasn't doing in the past?
I feel like his development has been very linear. There's a lot of players in the NFL where development is not linear. They have up years, they have down years. Look at Patrick Mahomes. It even fluctuates from game to game really high. Mm-hmm. But with Kyler, I feel like, he entered the NFL as a good quarterback and then has just progressively got better as a decision maker. Like, he's always been a very talented thrower. He's always been very accurate. But I truly think that he has mastered this system to the point where, however frustrated Cardinals fans get with Kliff, I don't want to put Kyler in any other system because he's so good in this one that I think it would be a detriment to him to make him relearn a new offense. I understand Cardinals fans get frustrated because the loss to the Packers and the loss to the Rams, and we lost the number 1 seed. I don't know if Kliff can win the big game. I don't care. I don't want Kyler playing in any other system because he's been in this one since he was 15 and he's really, really good at it. And right. I don't want to change that.
Yeah, and we fans, we get in our feelings, and I think of myself as someone who's a little more laid back, so I try not to kind of run with that too much. But I think we have to take a step back and look at perspective. Cardinals are tied for the best record in the league. Yes, they've lost 3 games, but aside from the Carolina game, which was with a backup quarterback, I don't feel like any of those were totally getting blown out of the water, 36-3 kind of losses. And the other 2 games were losses against good teams. Kliff has taken this team from 5 wins to 8 wins to whatever they're going to with now. So I think when you take a step back, there's a lot of things to be excited about, long-term. But one of the things that I think there is a reason maybe to be a little bit concerned about is the Cardinals' run defense. What is going on? They're so good against the pass, this year, but the run defense has been a struggle. What are your thoughts on that?
This has been frustrating for me because going into the season, I just looking at the defense on paper, I was like, this is going to be a really good defense. And quite frankly, the players up the middle are not playing as well as I thought they should have coming into this year. Jordan Phillips probably just had his best game of the year against the Rams, but if you're not really having a great game until week 14, when you started playing 2 months ago, that's a little bit concerning. Their only other defensive lineman that I think is good against the run is JJ Watt, and he's been out for a month now, more than that. So their interior defensive line at this point has one possibly good player in Jordan Phillips, who I'm not saying he's like dominant, but he's at least above average when he's having his good games.
Right.
Allen is not good against the run at all. More of a penetrator, more of a pass rusher than somebody I'm relying on against the run. Some of their edge players, I think, are good edge setters. But again, if you're just running stuff up the middle and you're hoping that your interior defensive line is going to get off blocks, you're hoping your linebackers are going to get off blocks, it doesn't matter how good your edge players are because they're just going to be sitting there and boxing in the run and then watching it still go for 7 yards anyway. And it's really been about that kind of like core group of 5 guys in the middle, the interior defensive line and the 2 linebackers. That's where they're struggling. Like, no easy way to say it, Simmons has underwhelmed compared to his physical talent and his draft status. Hicks is still getting more snaps than Zaven Collins, who's played like 3 snaps a game in 3 of the last 4 games. I don't know what the hell's going on there. There's just something deeply wrong about interior defensive line and linebacker, and I'm not quite sure why that is, because when you look at the talent of all these guys relative to their production, it doesn't match up here.
Yeah. And, one of the things I looked at coming into this year was with the pass defense, or when you look at the defense overall coming in, you'd think the pass defense is where they were going to struggle because there were so many questions at cornerback, right? The shell of Patrick Peterson's career moves on to Minnesota. He wasn't that great last couple of years anyway. But they're left with Robert Alford, who hadn't played in 2 years because of injuries, Byron Murphy, who's been a good slot corner, but, still got some things to prove. And then, Malcolm Butler, the guy we signed, who seemed like a good signing, then retires because of something personal. And then so you've got Alford, Murphy, and a 4th round rookie, Marco Wilson, starting. You think, man, this cornerback room is going to be a mess. But they've actually, I think they're like something like 6th or 7th in terms of yards per game against the pass, which to me is even more impressive when you consider how many teams have been playing from behind, right? Teams, you'd think they'd be putting up all these yards trying to get back in. So I'm wondering where I'm going with this is, do you think that some of it is schematically they've made this decision that they don't have the personnel to be good at both pass and run defense, so they are prioritizing pass defense? For example, you mentioned Jordan Hicks playing, and he's not. I think he's struggled against the run, but maybe he brings more things against the pass compared to a rookie like Zaven Collins, who's actually graded pretty well when he's been in there. So do you think this has been a decision just to kind of concede the run because they need to do that to be good against the pass?
I don't necessarily see it that way because even if you're playing light boxes, you can still stop the run. Like, you can stop the run from a 2-high safety shell, but you need the guys to do it. Like, you need to have good interior defensive linemen that can do what's called stealing gaps and get yourself back into good math against the run. However you want to do that, like some defensive line coaches, they like 2 eyes for that reason, because it's a really hard block for a guard to make instead of a 3 technique. Like, it's a very hard block for a guard to make. So you can have a 2-eye that's just an ass kicker that steals back both A gaps, and all of a sudden the linebackers don't have to worry about that, and your math is good. But if you don't have a guy who can do it, it almost doesn't matter, So
right.
I think they want to, and Vance Joseph, he comes from a very diverse background defensively. Like, you see him run some Wade Phillips stuff. You see him run some Saban stuff. Like, I think he is a good defensive coordinator. But the problem in the Vance Joseph era has been, I feel like he's never had the right guys to do what he wants to do. It seems like every year we're almost there, and on paper it looks like they have the right guys, but then they just don't. And this year is like 3 years in a row now, I feel like I've said this, where it's like, look, the schemes make sense. The schemes are sound. The players aren't executing. This was the year where I finally felt like the schemes are still sound and they're going to have the guys to execute, and the guys just haven't executed. So I really do think it all comes down to interior defensive line. Like, they can play the coverages they're playing and stop the run, but boy, they really need like a Jordan Davis type from Georgia that can come in and just make the math right. Because right now they don't have that.
Yeah, I've tended to look at that defensive interior and think that, you look at their PFF grades, none of them are grading well except Watt, who's injured, and that does seem like it's a big part of it. One of my channel members has a question about their actually that's the wrong. He had Billy Davis, their linebacking coach. He's asked, and I know JP's asked about Billy Davis before. And, when you look at their linebackers, you mentioned Isaiah Simmons. He's had some big plays, but overall he hasn't graded as well as you would hope. Zayvon Collins not being in there, and then you even look at guys like Devondre Campbell, who came in here and was okay last year, but goes to Green Bay and is having this career year. Jordan Hicks hasn't graded as well in Arizona as he did in Philadelphia. I mean, is there something with their linebacking coach, or there's something with their scheme that just doesn't allow linebackers to play as well? Is there something going on there?
I would say it's the opposite. If anything, this is a scheme where linebackers should thrive.
Okay.
Because you're playing a lot of 5-man surfaces where linebackers shouldn't be touched that much.
Mm-hmm.
And we can say the defensive line is doing a bad job of keeping their guys clean, but schematically speaking, the linebackers they shouldn't be asked to be superheroes in this scheme with how much 5-man surfaces they play, unless they're a nickel where it's more of a 4-2. But in base, it's a 5-2.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, every single offensive lineman is covered. Every single offensive lineman is going to, unless they are superhuman on combos, they're probably not getting to the second level that quickly. You should be free to run and hit and go make tackles. So I'm not prepared to say that he's not a good linebacker coach, because quite frankly, I'm not in the room. I don't see the drills that he runs. I don't see what he does, with these guys in meetings. I don't know him.
Yeah.
But I will say that this is a system where the linebackers should be better than they are. And I don't know if it's more coaching fault, and I don't know if it's more player fault. It's tough to say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, speaking of kind of perplexing issues, what is going on with the Cardinals' inability to play well at home and their dominance on the road? I mean, they've won every road game by at least 10 points. I mean, as dominant as they are on the road, you'd think they'd at least be a little better than 500 at home. What's going on with that?
I mean, part of it is they ran into the buzzsaw that is the Green Bay Packers. And, you want to talk about quality of coaching. They might have the best staff at developing offensive line in the league. So even though they were playing several starters down, their backups were playing like starters, and they just ran all over this Cardinals defensive line. And the Packers are arguably the best team in the entire NFL. So was that loss frustrating? Yes, because of the circumstances around it, but also Packers are the Packers. That's going to happen sometimes. Yeah. The Rams game honestly was a very winnable game that I felt Kyler cost them with those turnovers. And I know I just said progression is linear, and his arrow has steadily been pointing up literally ever since he got in the league, but those were bad picks.
Yeah.
And a division game in prime time, you can't give away those possessions. And I feel like those possessions were the difference in the game. So losing 2 games against likely top 4 seeds in the NFC playoffs, it's frustrating that they both happened at home, but it's also it's not like they were dropping games to bad teams at home. Like the Panthers game, they didn't have Kyler. I'm willing to forgive that. They got blown out. They were still able to, steal games on the road to kind of make up for that. So it's more of a quirk than a concern, I should say.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. And, I know a lot of Cardinals fans are really concerned after that Monday Night Football game, and it was disappointing. But, if you look at even, the other teams that are considered the best teams in the league right now, most of them have had a bad game here or there, right? And it feels almost like there's just this kind of myopic view and not taking it from a larger perspective. As you look ahead at what's left in terms of the Cardinals' schedule, are there any games that stand out to you, or anything you're looking for in the remaining games this season?
I mean, there's 2 in particular. The Colts game, I think, is going to be really fascinating because the Colts are a sneaky good team, but I still think the Cardinals are better. They should win that game. Even if it probably will be a pretty tough fight on Christmas Day. The Cowboys game, though, has massive implications. Massive implications. Not only because the Cowboys should probably be full healthy, full go by the time that game comes around. So I mean, they're hard enough to beat when they're injured, let alone when they're going to be fully healthy. But also beyond that, like Cardinals are still in the fight for the first seed. Cowboys are still in the fight for the first seed. Like there's a game that separates like the top 5 teams in the NFC.
Mm-hmm.
And that game is going to have huge implications for not just, who's getting the playoff bye. Let's say Green Bay happens to drop a game, like Cardinals are right back in this thing to get the first seed, and they're going to have to beat the Cowboys to maintain that. But also it's possible the Cowboys jump the Cardinals in seeding. And all of a sudden we see a scenario where that game determines like who's playing each other at home versus on the road in the playoffs, because they're probably going to meet again in the playoffs. So that game is massive between 2 very good teams. God willing, the Cardinals are healthy for it again, because they've been dealing with some injuries lately too. But that's probably the biggest game left on their schedule by a pretty fair margin.
Yeah, when I look at the schedule, I think those are the 2 games that stand out to me as well. And when I think of the Colts, to me, I think of them as such a high variance team. Like their highs in terms of when they're good are really high, but their lows, they can also have a stinker of a game. So you just never know.
Carson Wentz,
right? The Carson Wentz experience. So you don't know which Colts you're getting. So if you had to kind of rank where you think the Cardinals stand, and I know power rankings people, they're overdone, but when you look at where they stand compared to the rest of the class of the NFC and the NFL, where do you position them?
So I put the Packers number 1, and then like the Bucks, Cards, Cowboys, Rams tier is all 4 teams that you could all say are number 2, and you can order them however you want. So 2 through 5. I don't even care what the order is. Packers to me are still like clear number 1. And then you kind of have a tier below of like Niners, Washington, Eagles, throw in the Vikings there if you're feeling frisky. Like there's 3 clear tiers in the NFC to me. And the Cardinals are somewhere in that second one. It's not saying that they couldn't beat the Packers if they met again. They absolutely could. But it's hard for me to argue against the Packers as the best team in the conference.
How do you think the AFC teams stack compared to the where do they kind of rank compared to these?
Oh,
teams?
The AFC is a mess.
I'm sorry,
it's a mess.
Okay,
the AFC is like a complete cluster because, like, the Chiefs right now are the first seed, but let's be honest, they very easily could have lost that game against the Chargers. In which case, the Chargers would be, first in the AFC West, and the Chiefs would be like the 5th seed at best. So like. 3 plays last night determined whether they're the 1st seed or the 5th seed today. The Patriots are a really good team, but I mean, it's going to be a tough game against the Colts, who are also the 6th seed right now. That game has huge implications in seeding. The Titans, they started out really hot, but I feel like their offense has struggled mightily since the Derrick Henry injury. And like right now they're in the 3rd seed, but I don't see them as the 3rd best team in the AFC.
Right.
The Ravens, again, they're the 4th seed right now, but they're not the 4th best team in the AFC. They're way too banged up. Like they are on their last legs in terms of health right now. And then you got the Chargers, who are number 5, but they very easily could have, just knocked off the 1st seed last night. Yeah. So I think the Chargers are better than 5th. And I don't even know what to make of the Bills.
Right.
They're both good and not good at the same time, depending on what week you catch them on. So the AFC is a total mess. And that, like, not counting all the teams that are quote unquote in the hunt, right? Browns, Bengals, Broncos, Steelers. I'm not even going to count the Raiders. Dolphins are on like a 5-game win streak, and they're not out of it yet either. Like I wouldn't want to play the Dolphins right now. I can't predict the AFC at all. It's a mess.
You think the best of those teams, maybe the best couple of those would be in that 2nd tier with the Cardinals in terms of where you rank them, or would they be a tier below that?
They would all be in tier 2 in the NFC, I would say.
That makes sense.
The AFC is closer together with more teams, but the NFC is more top heavy.
Right. Makes sense.
And even then, the only teams that I might put in like tier 2 for NFC from the AFC, Chiefs, maybe. Patriots, probably. Chargers, probably. Possibly the Colts, but like again, we're looking at like there's no like firm like yes, this AFC team is definitely as good as Tampa, Arizona, Dallas, and Rams.
Right.
It's very much top-heavy conference that's going to eat each other alive in the playoffs versus messy AFC that if the right team gets hot, they have a chance, but
Right.
we don't know who it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So you think the Cardinals fans shouldn't panic right now? Like you think there has as good a chance as anyone at this point, or should we be worried?
The hard part's going to be getting past the divisional round in the NFC.
Yeah.
That's a murderer's row. That's the hard part.
Makes sense. Well, let's look ahead. You know, obviously, Cardinals fans are excited to be in the playoffs for the first time since 2015. So that's exciting. But let's look ahead towards after the season in terms of some of the off-season moves that the Cardinals are going to need to make decisions about. When you look ahead at the draft, right, the next draft, and I know we're still kind of getting a sense of who the really good players are and where the positions of depth are at. But what strategy or what positions do you think the Cardinals should focus on in the upcoming draft?
Interior defensive line, and then interior line again, and then interior line again.
Right.
Like if you just want to buy plane tickets to Arizona for the entire Georgia defense, fine, go for it.
Right.
Like that's where I'm at this point, because I mean they've invested high in linebacker the last couple years, and the run defense is still inconsistent. So at this point, I'm like, maybe get something else. Like maybe get a big boy up on the line that can make these linebackers' lives a little bit easier, like a Jordan Davis or the other UGA kid, number 95, who I really like a lot too. Like there's plenty of interior defensive line talent in this class that you can make work. That may or may not be available when the Cardinals pick, because the Cardinals could be anywhere between, I don't know, 22 and 32. Your guess is as good as mine at this point. Right. But there should be guys available for them to shore up that interior defensive line. But that to me is like their biggest need. They got receivers, they got a quarterback.
Yeah.
The offensive line, like you could use more depth, but I don't necessarily think that's been an issue as much this year as it was maybe in past years. DBs have played really well. They just got to get a good nose.
Yeah, that's kind of how I've looked at defensive interior. I do think they could use a guard. Justin Pugh's got a $12 million cap hit next year with a $2
Is it
million,
really that much?
Yeah, with $2 million in dead cap if they cut him. So maybe a guard in there, but yeah, interior defensive line is kind of how I've looked at that as well, because they've, like you said, invested those in middle linebackers, and there's a certain degree to where beefing up that defensive interior will help that investment in those linebackers actually work out, right? Help them out and let them do their job. And so I think that makes a lot of sense. And, a lot of people think, well, they should go cornerback early, but I think they've done a good job with the guys they've had. And I maybe see them get another cornerback on day 2 or 3. Right. But yeah, the defensive interior seems like an important place to prioritize. When you look at the Cardinals free agents, so let me just real quick read a list of some of the notable players who are either their rookie years are about to expire, or they have voidable dummy years that are going to expire. They're unrestricted free agents for one reason or other. Chandler Jones, Zach Ertz, Christian Kirk, AJ Green, James Conner, Chase Edmonds, Robert Alford, and then if you add to that the possibility that they might cut Justin Pugh or have to do something with that contract, who are you bringing back? And obviously I guess the cap's about to go up a lot, but there's still cap implications. What are you doing if you're Steve Keim with all those in terms of deciding who to bring back? Yeah,
that's a lot of good football players,
right?
That's a lot of good football. And that's the thing is I've come to a policy of don't overpay for running back, but God, Chase Edmonds is so dynamic and Connor's been so fantastic for them. If the money's right, I would bring them back, but the money being right is a big portion of that,
right?
Because they're just so good in this offense. I really like what Ertz has brought to the equation, but considering his age, if there's going to be an odd man out, I would have to imagine. Well, what did they give up for him? It was like a 6th, right?
They gave up. I feel like it was a fifth, and then they traded the cornerback Tay Gowan, who they got in the 6th round as part of that package.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for like a 1-year mercenary thing, when you think you're going to make a Super Bowl run, like he would probably be lower on the priority for me to keep, because I do feel like you can still get a guy to replace his production with cheaper means.
Mm-hmm.
And if that means like, well, we threw away a 5th round pick, like, well, yeah, because they did it because they're trying to make a run here. Like, I get it. They're being aggressive. Because I don't. You can't bring everybody back, can you?
Right.
I don't think you have that much space.
I haven't done the math, but I suspect with what Chandler Jones wants and what Christian Kirk might command on the free market.
Chandler Jones, like, you have to keep Chandler. Like, I'm sorry, that's not negotiable. Like,
no matter what he's asking. Okay.
As long as his medical's okay, you have to pay Chandler.
Okay.
Because what else are you going to get off the edge?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. Like, I like Gardick as a player. He ain't Chandler Jones.
Oh, come on, Marcus Golden. Cardinals fans love Marcus Golden, so you got to give some love.
That's perfect. I like Marcus Golden too, but he ain't Chandler Jones. Chandler Jones is one of the best pass rushers of his generation, and his one issue has been health. If he's healthy, and you can design the contract and make it just laden with incentives, like you can do not likely to be earned incentives for like snap counts, production, like whatever.
Yeah,
and protect yourself, but like you can't go into next year with your current edge rotation if it doesn't include Chandler Jones in it. Because like even looking at like the JJ Watt, like if you think you're going to bring Watt back for another year as well, which I don't know what his dead cap situation is, like he gets hurt a lot too. And I'm sorry, you're smack dab in the middle of a Super Bowl window. I'm not compromising that,
right?
For in the interest of saving like $4 million on Chandler Jones. Like, no, he needs to be on the field.
Watt's dead cap, it's like 15 million, so he's coming back or he's retiring. So
he'll probably come back, I would imagine.
Yeah. I don't, but
because he and D Hop have wanted to make a run together for a while. So and like you can restructure D Hop, I have to imagine, because that contract is crazy. And the Pew. If they feel like they can get Pew to do some sort of restructure to keep him around for a lot less hit, that's possible as well. Because again, like this is a team that I'm not interested in losing a lot of pieces because they're in the middle of a Super Bowl window. And I'm sorry, if the Saints can find out, if the Saints can figure out how to go from like $100 million over the cap to under the cap in like 2 days, like the Cardinals can do it too. Like there's a way to keep everybody here. Like the Bucs won the Super Bowl and brought back all 22 starters and their entire coaching staff. You can do it.
Right.
You just need to find a way.
Right. As they say, the cap is a myth, right? So
if you have the right front office staff, it is.
Right. So, and let me just kind of ask another question. And I've always been a fan of Baltimore's approach towards pass rush, right? The draft them, develop them, let them walk, and watch, rinse, repeat, and get the compensatory picks. But it sounds like you are a believer that if you've got a blue chip pass rusher, you pay him. You don't kind of get a system like what Baltimore does in terms of sustainable pass rush.
And it works when it works. I'll just say that.
Right. Okay.
It puts a lot of pressure on your scouting staff to hit on those third rounders every 3 years.
Right.
It puts a lot of pressure to be like, oh yeah, let's just go get Matt Judon from the bargain bin. And then, let's go get Jalen Ferguson. And we'll just hope that he's as good as Matt Judon. And then when he isn't, you're like, oh God, what did we do? Matt Judon's having like the best year of his career in New England. And he's one of the most effective pass rushers in the league. And Baltimore doesn't have that anymore. And I guarantee you they wish they did. They let Zadarius Smith go, who became one of the most effective pass rushers in the league in Green Bay. I bet you they wish they still had him as well.
Right.
So it works when it works, but when you're not consistently getting Pro Bowl and All-Pro pass rushers in the third round, which is not easy to do, and it's
Mhm.
not sustainable unless you literally have the best scouting staff in the league.
Which Baltimore has had. Yeah, Baltimore's been pretty good.
They've hit, but like, do you trust Arizona to do like even their first rounders the last couple years have been struggling? You think that they're going to get quality pass rusher? Like, they didn't even draft Chandler Jones. They traded for him.
Right.
So it's like, you think you're going to get another one when you didn't even draft the one you already got?
That's a good point. Yeah. So maybe unless they can pull off getting the entire Baltimore Ravens scouting department to come over, they might want to re-sign Chandler. That's fair.
Maybe. It's like the Raiders, when they let Khalil Mack go, because they're like, there was some financial stuff where they felt like they couldn't pay Khalil Mack, but like the entire point of the draft is to get players like Khalil Mack, and then you trade away Khalil Mack, and then they never had then they spent a 4th overall pick on Clelin Ferrell.
Right.
So it's like, when you got a good one, you got to keep one.
Right. That makes sense. So I want to thank you for all the things you've discussed and shared. I want to ask one last question that's a little bit off topic, but it's keeping with your interest for anyone who knows your channel. If you were to create a craft cocktail that represents the Arizona Cardinals, what would be in it and what would you call it?
I would call it the Red Sea.
Of course.
And I actually already, as you know, and what's funny is, before you even asked me this question, I was already working on a Cardinals cocktail because I just wanted something red for the next Cardinals episode I do. And I was like, I'm going to call it the Red Sea. So it's got an 1.5 ounces of hibiscus infused Blanco tequila. And what's funny is, like, you asked me this pre-show of like, hey, I'm gonna bring this up, and I was like, oh, I already have the thing I already have it in my phone. So it's 1.5 ounces of hibiscus Blanco tequila, 1 ounce of Ancho Reyes chili liqueur, which is deep red, lime juice to cut that, and then some kind of like spicy Aztec chocolate bitters. I haven't built it yet, but I kind of like put that in my head of like, I'm sure all those things taste just wonderful together, and they're red, so it fits the Cardinals.
Well, I look forward to seeing that on your next Cardinals video. So Brett, thank you again for being here. Will you let everyone know where they can find you? Now, I put your links in the description below, but tell everyone just real quick where they can find you and what they can expect if they subscribe to your channel and if they follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Brett Kollmann. I think the last Cardinals episode I did was like around week 7 or so, where I actually flew out to Cleveland. Ironically, I was wearing this hoodie. I flew out to Cleveland and I saw the Cardinals take on the Browns in person. That was when they blew out the Browns on the road. And I was there and, kind of like examining the Cardinals offense and, some of the things they do, how I would game plan against it. And I think it's one of the episodes that I'm most proud of, even though it's one of also the longest ones, because I did a really deep dive into like how Kliff's offense works and everything like that. So if you're interested in that kind of X's and O's content, you can go find that on my YouTube channel. And then I'm sure I'll be making another Cardinals episode sometime in January when inevitably they make their playoff run here.
Awesome. Well, yeah, if you aren't already subscribed to Brett, you need to check him out. Like I said, he does, in my opinion, the best NFL content on YouTube, hands down, the gold standard. Brett, appreciate you being here. I'd love to do this again sometime if you're willing, maybe sometime when there's some playoffs or maybe even next season. But really appreciate your time and your willingness to jump on here with us and hang out. And I know that the folks in the chat and the folks who watch the video really appreciate hearing your insights about the Cardinals.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna end the stream. I'm gonna, as I do on all my streams, I'm gonna just throw up a quick shout out. Thanks to the folks that are channel members. But thanks for watching. Definitely check out Brett's stuff. If you aren't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Appreciate everyone being here. Have a great day.